STL Today Talks is presented by Webster University, which offers innovation and leadership in online learning with the flexibility you need to fit your schedule. Visit webster.edu to view the undergraduate and graduate degrees available online.
Welcome everyone today to STL Today Talks. This is a talk about the arts presented by Webster University. So thank you, Webster University, for hosting this, and to my esteemed panel of guests who are joining us tonight. And I would like to just go around the table. We'll have a virtual roundtable and ask everyone to introduce themselves and the organization that you're affiliated with. And then hopefully we'll jump into a robust conversation about what's happening with our local arts scene. So Kwafi, would you like to begin?
I'm Kofi Coleman. I'm a managing director with the Muni.
Perfect. Andrew?
Andrew Jorgensen. I'm the general director of Opera Theater of St. Louis.
Wonderful. Peter?
I'm Peter Palermo. I'm the executive director of the Sheldon Concert Hall and Art Galleries.
Okay. And Ron?
I'm Ron Himes. I'm the producing director of the Black Rep.
Excellent. So we have several of St. Louis's artistic gems here in this conversation. We are lucky to have you and be able to talk to you guys about how this crisis has impacted the arts locally. So let's just start with that. If everyone could just talk about how you've been impacted by the pandemic and how you've been responding. So let's just follow the same order of introductions.
Okay. So again, I'm Kofi Coleman with the Muni. Our summer season, as it was planned, was postponed until 2021. So the main impact, of course, was not having a season as we typically presented. Our staff has been out of the office since March. The staff has not returned. So that's been a difficult adjustment just to work from home. As far as what we've been doing going forward, like many people, we've turned toward a digital platform to whatever extent we can do that. We've had some archive shows that we re-aired, and now we've got some new content. But it's the adjustment of getting a staff and a team working together from home. Kind of like everyone else, we had to make that change quickly, but everyone's making the adjustment, and that's where we are right now. It's a similar boat to, I think, my everyone else in the panel, but that's our current reality.
Our reality is much like Kofi's. We were very suddenly faced with the challenges of how to present the season. Of course, we couldn't. We ended up canceling our festival season in late spring and early summer. We were forced to also quickly pivot to a digital platform. We presented a digital festival across May, June, and into the first part of July. And now we're planning for the future. Like the Muni, we're out of the office, we're working remotely. Like everybody, we're working remotely. Not sure when we'll get back to that. And planning for the future with an uncertain crystal ball of what it means to fulfill our mission. Is it a digital world for the next 3, 6, 12 months? Will we get back to live performances? How can we do so safely for our audiences, for our staff, and for our artists? There have been some bright moments in this time, and I want to talk about them, but I think on the whole, it's a time of overwhelming challenge for arts organizations, as the fundamental thing that we do, which is bringing people together, is the very thing that cannot happen right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, well said, Andrew. Exactly true. We had our last performance at the Sheldon, which is a busy concert hall, 350 events a year, multiple events in the same day often. We had our last concert on March 11th and shut down. Fortunately, we haven't canceled so many shows. We've just pushed them off to a later date. And people have been very gracious about that and been willing to hang with us as we sort of adjust our calendar. People are hungry for, as always, for performance and eager to help a nonprofit deliver its mission. But I think that goodwill is not going to stretch into infinity. I think there will be a time when eventually we will have to deliver. But we have slowly been creeping back into our offices in ones and twos. And this past month, in the first week of July, we opened our gallery space to the public with social distancing and safety precautions in place. And but our Golf the Gallery is in its third year, and we're going to hold attendance down to probably a fifth of what it was in the past, but still we feel that we're open. We are welcoming people into the building in a safe manner, and that's what counts. We're back in we're back in business.
Ron?
Yes, our last performance was actually March 11th. We were in the extension week of a show that had sold out for the previous 3 weeks. And so we had added an extension week, and that weekend was sold out. We got the performance in on Wednesday night and then had to cancel the rest of the weekend. We had one more production in our season, which was to open in May. We optimistically moved it back to June, hoping that we might get it in June, and then ultimately wound up having to cancel the final show of our season. So we lost a weekend and then a full run of the final show of the season. This summer, we wouldn't normally be producing. We generally have an intensive summer workshop for young people, ages 8 to 17. And we've actually managed to get that in. We lost the first 2 weeks of it, but we have had young people in our facilities, social distanced and masked, from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, studying theater and making theater. So
That's amazing.
So the buzz is still going on. I pop in the building once or twice a week, and just to look in and make sure things are going well. And the young people are having a great time and are close to their culminating performance, which will be on July 31st.
Wonderful. So can you, each of you, please give us a little bit of hope? I know that nobody has a crystal ball, and so much of it is dependent on how things that we don't have control over necessarily, like how the data will turn out. But what can we expect might happen in the fall or in the winter? What kind of plans are you making for if in worst case scenarios? Can you each address that a little bit?
Sure, it's a little simpler for us in that we typically don't produce, right? We're outdoors, so fall and winter is from the stage standpoint, we don't produce. We do have a number of education programs which typically run during fall, winter, and spring. And like many people are, we're also looking at what's happening with the education systems in the different districts to see how those programs are affected. So education is kind of the big look, is the main thing that we look at in those months as we prepare for the season. Our 2021 season are the same 7 titles that we were going to present in 2020. So from that standpoint, we can start rehabbing the conversation of how we'll present those. But the winter is waiting and hoping, I believe, like everyone else will, to for this to change. Obviously, everyone hopes for a vaccine, and we'll see what develops and some of the other things that are starting now, like the sports teams and schoolwork. And hopefully, by the time we reach spring, it's a little bit better of a month. Actually, not a little bit, significantly better outlook by the time we get spring.
So no decision's been made about like fall programming that was educational programming yet?
No, a lot of that's really dependent on what's happening in the schools. So, even some of the education programs that run during the summer, we've been able to adjust those to give, for example, those muni kids and muni teens an opportunity to still collect virtually. They've been rehearsing and whatnot. And some of our online content, they've been able to appear in that, but it's all been from a digital format. So as we approach fall and winter, we'll see what the reality is, and we'll adjust to still participate and honor the mission, but in the safest way possible.
Right. Andrew?
There's a lot to be hopeful and optimistic about. The generosity of the arts community in St. Louis has been absolutely inspiring. The response from our patrons when we canceled performances in allowing us to keep their tickets as donations to support operation has been overwhelming. The adaptation my staff has undertaken in a short period of time is overwhelming. To take more than a dozen different programs online during our digital festival, from our opera camp to our opening night spotlights to opera theater's famous tent dinners, in real time, we are adapting into the 21st century, and there's a lot to be excited about there. I'm not as optimistic about an immediate cure or a solution that brings us back to normal in the near or midterm, but I'm also optimistic about getting back to making art through clever adaptation, producing opera online, producing opera digitally and sharing it with our audiences through a paywall, creating new works that respond to this moment, finding new ways to collaborate, going outside, socially distancing our artists, adapting the works. I'm not sure what the new normal will look like, and my crystal ball is as unclear as anyone's about when we will be in the clear zone for health. But in the meantime, there is real adaptation happening everywhere, and it's exciting to watch the field move forward in that way.
A quick follow-up. Have you seen new works produced just through this format where people have to do it like this, digitally?
Not yet. And in fact, I think we may be commissioning some of the first.
Wow.
Rather than trying to, operas are famous for being long and lengthy and complicated and lots of people.
Right.
And rather than trying to chop all of that up and condense it into a Zoom screen, let's invite artists to create for the time and conditions that we are living in. That's an effort that we're just getting started on right now at Opera Theater. It's a way of adapting to fulfill our mission despite these incredibly adverse circumstances.
Interesting. Peter?
It's been hard for me personally because so much of what the Sheldon is about your proximity to an artist, right? It's the intimacy. We're gathering together to witness something, and then we're going to go through it together with the artist. I mean, it's magic. And I had been very slow. I'll admit, I had been very slow to get on the video bandwagon. I felt that was a different art form. It's not really what we're about. We're about presenting live events. So we didn't have that infrastructure. We didn't have that muscle built up to start in on the video work when this happened. And so I said, okay, well, if we're going to do it, we got to do it right. It's got to be excellent. And now we find ourselves, because COVID gets you in so many ways, not just the ways you think, the supply chain is all messed up, and we can't actually get our hands on the gear that we've, through the generosity of our donors, purchased. Now we're waiting for the gear to arrive. So we're going to try to get it, and we're going to make it great. And our plan is to go online with our educational work in the fall. We don't expect any students to be in our building in the fall, but we still want to give students a chance to experience live performance wherever they are. So we'll come to them. We'll come to them through our new video link and bring to them a menu of educational options that they can look at. That's through the fall. We expect to maybe do some hybrid events in the Sheldon over the fall, where we might have maybe dozens of people in the room spread out safely, and a performer and a video link for the rest. So I think that kind of hybrid model will work for a little while, because I agree with Andrew, the end of this is going to be, it's going to be a ramp, right? It's not going to be like a door opening and closing. It's, oh, we're done. It's going to be a process that we have to pass through. So I think we have to think about things in terms of a dial, maybe, to turning it up and down.
Yeah. I'm hopeful that, soon we'll be able to get back to our programming. Similarly in the fall, we would have opened our season in September. We've already canceled our September production. We're hoping that our next production, which would be in January. So we're optimistically and, hopeful that, maybe by January we could, we've got designers working on the show as if. I'm meeting with designers. I'm casting a show in January. Of course, we're not going to announce it until there's a little certainty, little decline in, the pandemic here. But we are looking into Zooming a couple of readings in September in lieu of the September production. Our gala is scheduled in November. It will become a virtual event. But what we would normally be doing in the fall as well is a lot of work in the schools, as everybody else does. And that's just not going to be happening. You know, with schools not being sure of how they're going to operate, whether they're going to be virtual, whether they're going to be part-time. You know, the schools talking about 2 days a week and 3 days virtual, 3 days a week and 2 days virtual. Whatever formula they wind up with, we can be sure that they won't be allowing artists to be traipsing through the building.
Right.
You know, willy-nilly bringing in shows and doing what we do, and having an auditorium full of 200 or 300 kids is just not going to happen. So we as well will be looking at some virtual programming. You know, like myself, I really have resisted looking at video. I'm one who has always felt that video was the bane of live theater. And felt like, you know, if we start training our audiences to stay home and watch video, that's another hurdle when we come back, you know, because I don't think any of us have any seats in any of our theaters as comfortable as a couch. And I think that, you know, once people have really gotten used to sitting in that big lounge chair and reclining and starting the show, you know, and breaking the act whenever they want to, and extending the intermission over dinner and, you know, a quick run to the store and come back to start the second act, you know, just gives us more to work with. But you know, I'm optimistic because artists are optimistic. You know, artists are anxious to get back to work. Right. I've actually done a couple of front porch concerts in front of my home, where I had a couple of the musicians and the singers perform in my front yard, and my neighbors, you know, brought their lawn chairs out and sat in the street and sat across the street on the sidewalk, and had a great time. And, you know, when I'm out in the yard working out, they're like, when's the next concert? When are we going to have more music? And so, you know, we're looking at doing a couple of more of those. But, you know, a lot of what we'll be able to do is actually determined by, you know, the university. We're in residence at Washington University. And so a lot of our plans are contingent upon the final plans of the university.
You know, I'm going to push back a little bit on the idea that people get accustomed to consuming art from their house and then are less motivated to get dressed up and go and sit in a chair that's not as comfortable, because I think there'll be such pent-up demand for people to have that experience that, I mean, I could get emotional talking about it because I've been in each of these venues and seen things that are transformative and have touched me and stayed with me. And my children are into art and music, and it's just, I think there's going to be such a hunger for people to come back when we can come back safely. I can't wait. You know, I can't wait to get back in those seats. And I hope most people feel that way. I want to talk about the very real financial impact this has had on two levels. One, institutionally, and can you share a little bit about whether corporate sponsors and subscribers and patrons at what level have they stayed with you, and what kind of financial hit the institution itself has taken? And then on another level, the artist. And is there any coordinated effort to try to support artists through this time as well?
Can I start that one?
Sure.
Absolutely. We're facing so many crises right now. There's a health crisis, there's an economic crisis, there's a social justice crisis. We're facing so many crises right now, and the economic crisis is real. But our experience at Opera Theater has been extremely, extremely fortunate as our supporters have stayed by us. None of our philanthropists backed away from a commitment. They helped us to make settlement with the artists who would have come to work at Opera Theater this season. We paid 50% of the expected earnings of every single artist and company member who would have come to work for us. And our audiences have stayed by us. Half the audience members allowed us to keep tickets as donations to the company. I think Peter alluded earlier, the question is what happens next as we continue through a period of shifting priorities, of economic uncertainty, and of the continuation of the pandemic. I think a lot of the more existential questions for institutions will be 3, 6, 12 months from now as we continue to grapple with an evolving reality and economic reality. And so this is a time when we all need our supporters more than ever so that we can try to do things that will serve our mission. The artists are suffering because, of course, the artists can't turn to individual philanthropists and foundations, and so the artists can't work. And we, all four of us, were part of an effort back in May 31st. We did a concert, a virtual concert, Arts United STL, that brought together 15 arts organizations in St. Louis to raise funds for the Regional Arts Commission's Artist Relief Fund. We raised more than $350,000. Hundreds of artists have received emergency grants. It was a tremendous effort that shows, I think, a new kind of collaboration in St. Louis that we have to continue to look after the totality of our arts ecosystem going forward. But that's not going to be enough. That 350 is a drop in the bucket. And as it continues forward, I think artists have real economic needs. And as every gig gets canceled into the late summer and to the autumn and into the winter, there's a continuing need. And even with the expanded federal benefits, I think the need of artists is great and getting greater.
And I would add to the list, not just artists, but the craftsmen and the union labor that operate our venues and operate our shows. I think when we come back, we're going to have a shortage of those craftspeople because they'll have gone 6 months, 12 months, 18 months without a gig, and they're good. They're going to find other work. They're going to become carpenters. They're going to become electricians. They're going to find other work, and it's going to be hard to, I think, to bring them back. And so I'm a little worried about what our labor, our skilled labor pool looks like going down the line. But but there's hardship all around. I mean, I think everybody in all sectors is feeling it. Our donors have been incredibly generous. I think those people who care about the Sheldon continue to care about the Sheldon, and they'll be there for us. I think what's harder is some of the dollars we count on, that are earmarked by the state or the federal government, or earmarked sales tax that the arts are to receive. Those things, because the economy is in such trouble, those receipts aren't what they should have been. Therefore, our receipts aren't what they should have been.
Right.
Our donations.
Like, what percentage are you off? Do you have an idea of, like, right now, what?
How far we're going to be short? I mean, we set we set a target that we thought was conservative, right? And maybe others would share that. But we certainly think we're going to be down maybe 20-30% down in our donations looking forward for the year. And now we can weather that. Right. We can weather that, and we'll be there on the other side. What does the other side look like? But that's the mystery. That's the mystery. Right. But I know we'll weather it, and we'll be there for St. Louis when we get to the other side.
Right. And so, and that's an interesting thing. So for us, and looking at the artists, we canceled the last 2 shows I mentioned, but we kept all our staff on through the end of May, and were able to, support them that way. Now, a lot of the larger institutions have a little more bandwidth. I don't think that we would necessarily survive 20 or 30%. I don't know that we could weather that. Those would be some major body blows for us. Right now, we're looking at we can see our way through this next quarter. And then we're really beginning to wonder what we're going to do if things don't change. As you know, with most organizations, ours as well have a really, really loyal audience base. And so probably 75 to 80% of our season ticket holders and single ticket holders as well refunded their ticket from those two canceled productions. We've gotten calls from season ticket holders wanting to know, when we were going to announce the fall season so that they could renew their season tickets. And, we're just not willing to announce the season, begin to sell season tickets, and then have to deal with cancellations and refunds again. And so to not put ourselves in that situation, nor to put our audience in that situation, we're holding off announcing a season. In terms of our support, one of the things that happens for a lot of institutions of color and for small and mid-sized institutions is that a lot of our sponsors who don't make long-term commitments, who don't make sizable commitments, look for us to program. And if we're not programming, then they're not necessarily supporting. And so we don't have that cash reserve or that endowment fund to draw upon. And so like individual artists, institutions like ours are really, really sort of, on shaky kind of ground.
Yeah, well, I think first Andrew and Peter and Ron have summed it up really well. I think, Peter, your point about how we define not just artists, but how the artist created. There are so many people, right, who fall somewhere in a gap between those that are in the office and those that are on the stage. And they are the people who are truly, look, there's suffering going on all around, across the board, there's no question there. But that industry, which supports both theater and art and entertainment, they're getting hit from all sides. So to answer your question specifically, we were able to maintain the relationships with the corporate sponsors we had. When we postponed the season, we were last in the office was March, so we were in subscript season ticket sales, but no single ticket. So those subscribers, were in a program, we're in a process to try to maintain as much of those as donations. About 20% have currently made that decision, but at the time we postponed the season, we were looking at approximately a $4.5 million loss on the year. We're an institution. 85% of our revenue is earned as opposed to contributed. So we're not earning any, right? There are no shows, so there are some challenges there. But similar to what Peter said, we will be back. We're in responsible footing, but it's a significant hit to the institution. But I worry far more about the individuals who are thinking every day about how do they feed their families. That's the real question. Some of these online shows we've done, specifically the new variety shows, give us a small opportunity to employ some people, right? To film. There's some crew, some people there are 9 labor unions represented on our lot at any given moment, and so some individuals have been able to get some work, but of course it pales in comparison to what the expectation is or what they planned on for the summer. So it's hard. These people are not they're not simply employees, they're family, they're friends. We do something together every year that we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in. So it's hard. It's hard to see and hard to figure out what the best way to make sure that there's a tomorrow for all those people in this industry.
Yeah.
Another group of people, if I could real quick, we have a professional intern program. And so this year we have accepted 10 outstanding applicants. These are, college graduates who just graduated in May, who are ready to start that transition from academia to a career in the theater. And of course, all of them are on hold because the bulk of what they do for us, of course, is the work that we do in the schools, our education and community programs. But, we also have administrative and technical and production interns as well. And with, production schedules being up in the air, school programs being up in the air, our commitment to these people these young college graduates who are eager to start their careers is, you know, we've got to tell you to wait and see. You know, we've had a couple of conversations with them. You know, we let them know that we're still committed to getting them here to St. Louis. They come from all over. And at this point, it just is not a commitment that we can make to them to say, come on, we're ready to start your contract, and not know what programming will be beyond September.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I think the impact on emerging artists, young artists who are just trying right now to get their career started. I mean, this could have like impacts on their entire career trajectories, which is really tragic. And, you know, on a,
Can I just say though, you know, calculus was invented during a lockdown.
I know, I've heard that many times.
There could be some great art happening right now that that will be there for us when we emerge from this. So
right. Actually, that's a good segue.
Right, they've got nothing else to do. So.
All right, this is a good segue. This was a question that was submitted. Has there been a new artist, venue, or performance that you've discovered through streaming that you might not have found otherwise, that you have discovered in the pandemic that you could share with people who are watching?
Wow, that's a great question.
Great question.
Well, there actually is a world premiere Zoom musical going on right now from a theater in Detroit that I was going to be watching.
Wow.
And it's a new musical about the evolution of R&B music and in Detroit. Not the Motown story,
right,
but just sort of all the other sort of R&B and soul and blues that were coming out of Detroit during the 40s and 50s. And I had been watching previews of it and was very, very excited to see it. And I'm hoping that it's taped and available for me to watch later.
I hope so too. I hope I can search for it and try to find that online.
It's called Hastings.
It's called what?
Hastings Street.
Hastings Street.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I don't have
Go ahead, Kofi, please.
Well, it's not so anticlimactic. I don't have a specific artist yet. What's been really interesting, and I think this is what Peter alluded to, is even in creating new online content, we've seen artists who were historically dancers or singers who are figuring out a way to not just do that, but creatively make videos that are not just a camera pointed at a person doing a single dance. So watching those individuals exercise a different artistic muscle that I maybe didn't know that they had, maybe they did, and they just never had the vehicle to do that. That's been really entertaining and encouraging. I think that for these younger artists, they're figuring out a way to expand that skill set a little bit into what is currently the normal, which is an online world. I agree with Ron. Ultimately, I don't want to live in that world. That's not what we do. We have an 11,000 seat theater, so we need people to come outside. But in the meantime, watching artists still, because I think that what they do at their core is what's in their heart, to perform and to share that. So being able to find a different way to do that right now it's encouraging to see.
Yeah. Andrew, do you have?
Watching streaming has exposed me to some artists, and we had our Young Artists program brings together 35 of the most talented emerging opera singers from around the country every year. And of course, we couldn't do that this year, but working over Zoom, we were able to work with those singers and hear from them and meet them. And so I was able to meet a young soprano who did one of our virtual master classes, who my colleagues had discovered out on the audition tour, but who I would not have met this year were it not for Zoom. Young soprano named Lindsay Reynolds, who just knocked us out. And I can't wait to bring her back to opera theater in years ahead, because even over the limitations of Zoom, and I agree with my colleagues that we are going to get back to live and we have to get back to live, but even over the limitations of Zoom, an artist who has that kind of talent can still touch you through through the many limitations of technology.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I would do a shout out for a friend of the Sheldon, Peter Martin, who really has this streaming thing down. He is doing an excellent concert every week. Every week's different. He was an early adopter to this whole thing and was well set to take advantage of it. So he's doing great work. And then the only other new thing I picked up, I think last week, was an all-female Japanese heavy metal band called Boris. So
oh, that sounds great. That sounds great. So I want to do a quick just show of hands questions, and then I can ask people who want to comment on them. So how many of you think that it will take actually having a vaccine before performers are comfortable being back on stage in front of an audience? Show of hands that it will actually take a vaccine. Okay. So for those of you who disagree, what will it take for performers to feel safe, to be, in a collaborative space, especially if you're singing or, we saw a lot of early things, concerns about that, although I did read that was later sort of people walked that back. But what will it take for performers to feel safe, being able to be back on stage in a group in front of a crowd?
Protocols. Yeah. It'll take smart protocols. One of my colleagues mentioned that we're watching what's happening on Broadway. We're watching what's happening in professional sports. We're watching what's happening in film and television. We're watching the big players
Right.
where there are many more zeros involved in their decisions, and they're
Right.
working on protocols. I don't think we're going to go back to full theaters with every seat in the house sold out until there's a vaccine, but there are already places in Europe, at the Wolf Trap Opera outside Washington, D.C. They quarantined their singers all together, and they have socially distanced audiences and singers on stage who have been quarantining together.
Right.
People are beginning to find mechanisms. That's not the same as saying we're getting back to sold out opening night,
Right.
but people are going to invent protocols, and we're going to watch with great interest as people try around the country and around the world, and we're going to get smart quick.
One more question. Have you guys been thinking about or found a way to do things, performances outside that we can buy tickets to? Because I just feel like there's a huge demand, and I would buy a ticket to watch any performance of any of your institutions outside in a heartbeat. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, as the outdoor theater,
I know, right? I know.
There's a lot of information about obviously the reduced spread outdoors.
Right.
It still comes down to the volume of people. It comes down to some really basic things, that there are performers and groups that are represented by unions and organizations, and until all of those groups also are comfortable, it doesn't, that decision is not ultimately just ours, and that's the truth of it. It's not to lay blame at anyone's feet. I think everyone is making the most responsible choices possible, but it comes down to how many people are you bringing in, how do they get in and out. So the indoor outdoor question, outside is definitely helpful, but it's unfortunately not, going outside is not a magic elixir. It's just not. There's still, how do you get them in, how do you get them out, how do you keep people from actually staying apart. We also know that we're in a society where there's a sliding scale of belief in the danger of this situation. And when you bring volumes of people together in a community and they don't necessarily see the danger or rank it in the same way, you will always face a challenge of getting if the person next to you does not believe in masks, they don't believe in masks, and that's a reality. So I think that, I agree with Andrew about protocols. The truth is that I shouldn't say that, but the reality is they go so far, and then you need individuals to participate, because without them voluntarily participating in those protocols, we're
not going to see bouncers at the Muni. Like, we're just going to need to have bouncers there to say, oh, this many people can go in. You have this pared down, stripped down number of performers on stage. I mean, I know.
You help, and I think that's a really interesting point. What we all do, there's such a human element to it, right? I don't know how you do a musical and you convey a scene about emotion with a face shield necessarily. So there are some of those parts that fundamentally what some of us do require human proximity within for the actors and in the audience. So there are challenges. Now some people have answered the outside question. I know there's a venue, I think in towards St. Charles, that they're doing the drive-ins and those kind of things. So those exist, but everyone has to measure if those answer their mission or not.
Right. Can anybody else chime in on whether there's possibilities of things outside?
We are certainly looking at it. Partially, we're sort of waiting for it not to be 95% humidity and 95 degrees outside, because I don't think anybody would want to be out. Maybe you would. Maybe you're ready. You're that ready for it. But I think it would be much more pleasant and successful. Maybe it's a cordoned off area. Bring your own chair. Stay in your zone. But as Kofi says, we still have to get people in and out to the bathroom. We still have to figure out how to get people to the bar, and so they don't congregate and they don't, there's a lot of hurdles to overcome, and outside isn't a magic bullet, although it certainly seems like we could achieve it quicker, and, more quickly than an in version.
Yeah, I think that for a lot of venues, being on a college campus, you don't have that, but I think that a lot of venues are going to have to start anticipating losing their bar revenue. That will be something that doesn't come back for a while. I think even after we get back, I think, dealing with protocols of how we get them in and out of facilities, how we get them to the restrooms are things that we know we have to deal with. I think that being able to serve them a drink will not be central to us coming back. And then I think, as Kofi mentioned, I think, sort of these drive-in concerts have started happening. And I think that, if in fact they work, we may start seeing, other art forms, opera, theater, dance, certainly looking at the possibility of, operating in those fashions with audiences being able to social distance themselves by staying in their cars and maintaining, not being in close proximity that way. But, a big part of this, in terms of, like, as you mentioned, audiences are ready to come back now. A lot of audiences are. I mean, and so I think that in line protocols in place and people feeling comfortable, artists are ready to work. I mean, there's a constant thread going on between the actors union and actors on all social media of why can't we work? Why are they not? The union is holding things up. So artists are ready to work. Audiences are ready for performances. I just think that we have to really, as a society, pull together to sort of, squelch this, and hopefully, the vaccination comes in soon enough.
Oh my gosh, from your lips, sir. Andrew, was there anything that you wanted to add to that? No. Well, I wanted to wrap up by, first of all, thanking each of you, not just for joining us, but for what your organizations add to our region. It's what makes places worth living in, to have world-class performance, music, opera, everything that is offered here really is what makes people want to live here and makes people thrive here and makes our lives better. So thank you for joining us for this conversation. Thank you, Webster University, for sponsoring it. And we look forward to seeing you guys back when you're on stage or on screen through, however we can. We look forward to supporting you all in the future. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.